Alright guys, welcome to the show. I hope you sat there, either fucking scantily clad or dressed in your World Around You branded clothing. If you're not, go to worldaroundyou.com, order yourself a t-shirt, listen to these shows, and then come back to these shows when you've got your t-shirt and listen to the show in your t-shirt. Anyway, I'll let you crack on with the show. Alright guys, I'm the World Around You, and this is Pause for Thought on Threshold FM, and usually, right, on this show, I'm trying to teach you about how you're being controlled by something you can't see. Except this week, I'm going to mix it up a bit, I'm going to teach you about something that can't see, that you can control. But let's have a song to get us started. This is Stay for the Ride by Shotty Horror. If you didn't work it out during the song or from the notification that, probably got sent out by Jimmy, or, from the title of the show, if for whatever reason you're listening to this on demand, then this week's show, it's all about robots and automatons. And already, right, that seems like a pretty contentious topic, at least as a title, because people seem quite divided in it on what a robot actually is. Historically speaking, an automaton is something that can move or perform a function of its own accord. The whole thing was made by a person. So not like in the same way like a fucking tree moves in the wind on its own, Not like that. It's got to have been made by a person and does something that it was supposed to do. But for a long time, a robot was that and all, So the word robot itself, we like a little bit of etymology on this show, though. We want to know where things come from. How did that come about? Well, the word robot, it wasn't... it's not that old. It was invented by a Slovakian guy, and he came up with it to help name the labourers in what I think was his brother's play, but I know it happened in 1921. More recently, though, a robot's something that is considered a computer programmable machine, meaning, right, that realistically, a digital alarm clock or your washing machine, right? They're robots. They're not impressive robots unless, you've got one of those alarm clocks that fires a propeller into the air or fires water in your missus's eye when she's lying in bed. Or if, maybe you are a woman and you might like to masturbate on the washing machine. But either way, like, that would help with the impressiveness of the washing machine, I imagine. But the robots either way because they're computer programmable machines. And apparently, right, the first robot of this sort of description came about in 1944 when a bloke called George created what sounds like a mechanical arm. Like literally like an arm that could move, that was a machine. Not like what people with no arms would wear now, not like a bionic fixture that you strap into your shoulder or like attach like through wires to your scapula or out like that, but a big chunk of metal possibly riveted to some hydraulics connected to another big chunk of metal, which then squeezes these chunks of metal together to make another chunk of metal move like a finger. But it was computer programmable. Except, right, no one used it for 10 years. No one was interested in it until 1954 because for whatever reason, people just seemed to be really against the idea of increasing productivity across the board. Maybe it was because of the war. Maybe it was because of World War II. Maybe they thought, people need work. They can't just come back from fucking running around France killing Germans. They need to come back here and build cars. They need to work through the PTSD, not sit at home with their feet up relaxing. We've traumatised them. We can get them to fucking build computers now. We don't know what computers are, but we can at least build the boxes that we'll try and shove a computer into in about 20 years' time. But personally, though, I mean, a lot of people don't think people should work, but personally, I think that people should be able to sponsor a robot in the same way that you'd sponsor a child or a dog or one of those scabby donkeys off the telly, except instead of getting a postcard from some form of scammer that had enough money to buy some adverts on Challenge at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you get back a portion of the company's profits of the robot that you've paid towards. So it's like working, except you're putting money in rather than time. So it's like working, but you're not working. You just become a type of investor, like a sleeping partner in it, but something more space age sounding. So like a cryo partner, like a cryothesicist. I don't know. Give it a good name and people will be all over it. Anyway, It does get hard to tell when the first of these robotic arms really did exist, because it looks as though everyone wants to be the first to claim. Well, either everyone wants to be the first, or they want to be the one to claim they were first, not the first to claim. Like, the first to claim doesn't really mean they were the first to do it. They just realise there's an importance in being the first to do it. In the same way, though, like a group of teenagers will bicker about losing their virginity, and I would imagine that it's the same in the world of robotics as it is in your teenage years. You know, the one that's keeping quiet is probably the one who's actually lost the virginity. You know, Johnny, the one that's forced to regularly sleep with his uncle. He lost his virginity at the start of secondary school, but he's not proud of that, you know what I mean? And he doesn't want people to know. Just like the Portuguese scientist in the late 1920s that invented the computer-guided mechanical turtle that he fastened to the underside of his work desk in order to fillet himself and his dogs, and later down the line beat his wife and children and eventually himself to death with, leaving only a frustrated working dog to eat the remains of the family until a travelling wine merchant happened to pop by to try and use the toilet, and he discovered the remains. The famous case is most likely as well the first use of the phrase "turtle's head in me trousers," and was quite possibly an inspiration for all the wartime cartoons that we all came to know and love. Anyway, this so-called first machine, though, by America, right? Let's claim America are the first, because America love to be the first for most things, right? America thinks we did the first of everything. But the first robot machine by America was called Unimate, which is how English people refer to what Americans would call a college roommate. And Unimate went on to do what a lot of people you know from university went on to do too. The same repetitive task for the rest of their lives. Now, some people say, right, that a mechanical arm was the first robot produced, right? And that too was used for production lines, but it's hard to be sure because it seems like a very, very competitive field. All these people fighting over robots just after World War One. Many suggest that could be what World War One was actually fought for the control of the secret to build automatons or robots, or that World War Two was actually fought with these automatons, and these people refer to these tumultuous times as the robot wars. Now, amongst these fanatics, though, it seems that the general consensus was that the only robot war that mattered was the one that was frontlined by Craig Charles, and the later Robot Wars 2, couldn't really escape the shadow left by its former self, and that's why they just banged the 2 at the end of the name, rather than thinking up a decent name for it. But what are robots used for now, boys and girls? Now, I'd argue that they're used to observe us, to learn about us, in order to sell us things, to make us believe things, to change our opinions on things, to control all of us. But just how will all these robots, right? How will all these robots control us all? Personally, I think it's going to come down to necessities like gas, electricity, and water supplies, right? One day, there'll be an innovation in technology that'll make it seem like it does something really good, like universally good, like saving the world or stopping the seas from swallowing us up or ending starvation in a country that you're unsure of the location of, to the point of it, right, where the outcome of the technology is so widely accepted as fortuitous that to even recommend its nefariousness will have you labelled as a crank or somehow labelled as a racist. They'll put these little devices into everyone's homes, slowly at first, initially with more and more benefits for the people using them, alongside the world-saving features, that will become more widely known, and that'll be what's advertised more so. And now they might save you a bit of money here and there and make you buy into the idea, and then you start recommending them to your friends and family, then eventually they'll become law, because they can save the world, and everyone will have to have these monitors put into their homes, measuring how much hot water you use each day, counting every joule of electricity that passes through your plug sockets, until one day they, the big they, decide to start using these monitors to do what they're actually intended for. Maybe they limit you, ration your electricity so that you have to start buying USB battery packs, and storing all your electricity that you could used to just get out the wall whenever you wanted. Then you've got to start storing your electricity on USB packs on your shelves, and you'll have to buy the big Vase shelves as well, plus their branded USB packs, and you'll only be really wanting to use them when the state-sanctioned blackouts roll around your country and are all over the world, Maybe they'll only ration the electricity, gas and water in certain areas. Maybe they'll use it to lower income in certain areas so that people can't work. Maybe they'll actually use it on lower income houses to push poorer people out of the areas that get nicer weather, so places that tend to be hotter because they're not near hills and mountains and more sunshine, less rain. They'll force all the poorer people out so they can move all the richer people in. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're just ways to keep the working classes miserable and indoors, or as some ploy to simply help sell raincoats for when they have to go outside to work in the factories, and to help sell jumpers and insulated long johns for when they're not outside. Anyway, I can't remember what I was talking about or where I was going with this, so let's have a song. This is Lunacy, Manga and Jest with Zero Fucks. Just a minute, guys. I just wanted a little calm advert for you, a little calmer advert. And if you're like me, a pseudo-intellectual, what you might enjoy are my books. You've got Uneducated Guesses, where I found a load of big words I don't know the meaning to, and then tried to work out what they mean by breaking down the syllables and drew an illustration for each one. You've got How to Date an Antique Table, A Lover's Guide, which is a book that will tell you how to get your end away with an antique table, complete with how to find an antique table, where to take an antique table on a date, like you could take it dogging, you could take it to the cinema, you could take it for a picnic, and some chat-up lines as well, like, I know I'm drunk, but you look absolutely canted. And even then you got some pictures in the back of some of my taxidermy and that as well. And you've got my third book, More You Know, which is a book of very well-researched fake facts. Just a book of lies, basically. And some of them were suggested, as in topic-wise, were suggested by some of the people from TikTok. So you might even, if you took part in that, you might even have your username on the first couple pages of that book. Anyway, if you, like I say, if you're enjoying these, you might like the books. And you can get access to the books through Patreon or through my website. Or fucking let you crack on with the show, guys. The first real robots, though, as I said, they were called automatons, and they've been about since ancient times. They initially had jobs as servants, they rang bells, they fought battles, and even tried to shag the locals at times. And I'm not really sure how I'm going to put these together for the show, but I'm not really sure where to start, because in all honesty, I'm not sure where the start would actually be, because I don't know what ancient times became before other ancient times, but it seems that there's always been controllable metal men clanging about, and they've been there for thousands of years, just different people taking ownership of them. It seems like entire wars were fought for control over them and all, a lot like Fallout New Vegas when they want the yes men. I'll try and keep it, what I'll do is I'll try and keep it to specific areas, right, as we work through my notes. Now, not all of these automatons had anthropomorphic shapes, though. They weren't all metal men. One ancient engineer managed to make an array of three-legged tables that could move around, which, personally, I think that's something that should be adopted into modern day life, innit? And it could be accepted by us pretty easily. Like, I don't like the idea of a smart television or a smart fridge, because I don't want a fridge that's able to read the barcodes of my food and then tell my TV to show me adverts relating to those products when I'm running low on them. I don't want it knowing, oh, he's bought this cheap cheese here, but we could probably make him spend 20p more on Cathedral City cheese. I don't want my telly doing that. But if you give me a smart table, right, and you pop it beside the couch, so that, at night time when I'm a little worse for wear and looking for the side table, sort of aimlessly aiming a drinks glass to it, the table just jumps up, takes a couple steps over and raises itself to me glass. That'd be fucking sick, mate. Rather than having to reach around trying to find a table that you know is there somewhere, but you're just not overly sure where the edge is. Personally, right, I'd even take it a step further and make the tabletop out of those things that you measure floor tiles with. When you've got to do a tricky cut in floor tiles or in piping, and you push those yellow sticks on a black handle into it and it gives you the curve or whatever you need. Make some form of system of them in the tabletop and make them computer navigated, so that when you're aiming the glass, right, and say you're aiming the glass over where your lighter is on your table next to your couch, right, a ripple effect occurs in the tabletop, right, and it snakes the lighter away so you can put the glass down exactly where you're aiming it, and you never miss. You never just end up dropping the glass on the floor or balancing it on the edge of a coaster on the edge of a table and fucking pouring it all over the carpet, and then you don't get fucking beaten up by your girlfriend anymore. Things like that, you know what I mean? Like, it just fucking improve people's lives, mate. And fucking free Jack. But obviously, they didn't have this technology back then in ancient Greece, because a lot of their floors wouldn't have been tiles, they would have been marble, so they wouldn't have needed to invent them little plastic sticks for measuring the angles out yet. So it was I am a bit ahead of the time there, but it's possible in nowadays, And there was also this massive mechanical bull, a lot like the ones you see at failing pubs of a weekend, except this one could breathe fire and was made from bronze, and unlike the ones you see in pubs, the real ones actually had a second very real mechanical bull next to them, not just an identical one. It was a separate one that was also identical. And bronze seems to be the in thing at the time as well for making mechanical creatures, because there was this bloke that was called Talos, or Talos, Talos, like in Skyrim. And he defended Crete from something or other, and he was made entirely of bronze. So that I've got to wonder, like, if he was like a god figure back then, is that where we get why we call it the Bronze Age? It's got to be a possibility, Now, moving over to ancient Egypt, they didn't really go fully mental with the automatons, and you'd think if anyone would, it would have been the ancient Egyptians, going off what we'd learned about them in the other weeks, with how they used to fucking the relationship they had with aliens and monsters and gods. And I guess to really have the time for making robots, which you'd think they would, but mostly they just seem to use them to make maths seem more popular, which is fucking weird, mate. That's probably one of the weirdest uses for robots ever. Let's make church more appealing by filling it with what looks like more people, except when you go, blessed be with you, blessed be with you, and shake hands with them, there's a good chance that, a good percentage, you could be sat next to one that's going to fucking crush your knuckles. So it's just odd, they did, but it's something that's been repeated though. History repeats itself, mate. Football teams last year were using cardboard cutouts. Japanese teams were using sex dolls for their sports games. The ancient Egyptians would have automatons at the masses that would just move their heads in the crowd. What makes it weird though, is that they'd also make some of the deities out of metal and have them move and all. So that means there's always this weird, creepy possibility, right, that there were some metal men in church when no one else was there, constantly moving and praying, also worshipping metal gods that were there moving around when there was no priests knocking about. Because if they didn't have electricity, then realistically there's no real way of turning them off and on. They must have just been constantly able to move these things around, make these things move constantly through, I don't know, some form of fucking counterbalancing technique or something. Or maybe if you fucking have a pendulum of some description, it might be able to constantly make things move and keep things moving. Or maybe the momentum from one machine turned the other and you just had to come and crank it like every 3 days or something. I'm not sure. Moving on to the Buddhists though. Buddhists had metal people, right? And they seem to reference them a lot in the things that I saw and read, which seems strange as well for Buddhists to be like that, innit? Because fucking Lisa Simpson always taught us that Buddhists don't want material possessions, and maybe that's why this very old religion of Buddhism, maybe it learnt quite early on it's best to stay away from material goods because it had these metal men. Maybe they had an uprising of fucking platinum people, fucking gold geezers, bronze boys, and or maybe all led by a certain silver somebody that waged war on the Buddhists. Now, it's something that I'm not very well read on though, and we may cover it another time because it seems quite an interesting tale there. Now, I'm not sure how much of a move it is from Buddhists to China, if I'm honest, because I know Buddhists aren't restricted to one country. I think Buddhism is, I want to say, Japan, maybe a bit of India, maybe around Asia. Definitely Asia, though, isn't it? But anyway, going to China, there's some interesting stories I found from China about robots. So, around 1,600 years ago, someone from China that was called Master Yan Shi, he cobbled together a feat of science, mate. Even by modern standards, right, it'd be considered fucking world-changing. Astronomical, mate. Fucking massive, right? Not in the sense of in the sense of scale of how well he did, not like he made like a massive monster of metal. You know, he didn't make fucking the real Mecha Streisand out like that, like fucking 1600 years ago. Nothing like that. He just made something that was very, very clever. It was what appeared to be a fully autonomous metal man that looked exactly like a person as well. It could perform tricks like a person as well. Now, I'm unsure what the tricks would be, but it's 4 AD, so I can't. 400 AD in it, so I can't imagine, it's things like fire breathing or anything too grand like escapism. Probably something more along the lines of like a simple card trick or hoop magic, making sausages disappear, ripping off its own thumb, taking noses off of children and finding coins behind a person's ear maybe. Maybe a little bit of cold reading of a room at best, your average children's entertainer. Except this robot man wasn't taken to entertain children by it. It was taken to the king. I can't remember if the king was the right word. It feels like it should be emperor, but that feels wrong and all. Shogun, maybe. Was shogun strictly Japanese? Whatever, let's call him the king. A king's a good term for it. It might be king, fuck it, the king at the time or the area. The robot performed these tricks with Master Yanshi beside it, right? And fucking did pretty well, mate. Fucking went down a storm, apparently. It won over the king, right, and managed to also catch the eye of a few of the local women. So the robot went over to the women, started flirting with them, mate, stroking the thighs, lightly pulling at the hair, going, "Is this real?" Pulling out a little cog and ball bearings just out of sight, of everyone else under the table, flirtatiously, gave one of them a smiley. And just as he was asking the smaller of the women if she thinks she's got the core strength to push a grapefruit back out of her arsehole, the king overheard and got a little bit funny, mate. The king immediately issued a death sentence to Metal Mickey, but Master Yanshi had planned for this, and what he did was he fucking cut up the metallic molester, and that in itself should be a fucking children's TV show, the metallic molesters. The metallic molesters from Mars, mate. Anyway, he opened up his chest, right, and started to remove parts that on a person would be considered vital organs. And the king found this fascinating by all accounts and started to remove some of the pieces himself, possibly testing Mickey's theory that the smaller lady did have good core strength, seeing if she can indeed clutch and expel larger and larger robotic organs from the automaton from her own bumhole, but we're unsure of what order he tried to place the organs in a rectum, or if he even tried this at all. I can only speculate based on what I would do if I was a king. But the king did, however, confiscate the metal man, possibly to carry out experiments, but quite possibly to learn from the robot, because the king had never had the confidence to just approach women. He'd always just taken hostages and forced them into marriage, and the king really wanted to learn what it meant to love. Let's have a song. This is Normal by Exhibit, Demrick and Be Real. If you're struggling for like a Christmas gift or something for someone and you're thinking to yourself, I think a pair of mouse testicles or a love heart full of mouse intestines might be a bit strong for them. And whether it's for Christmas, birthdays, a late Valentine's Day gift, Mother's Day, or just, to show someone that you actually think about them. What about a shirt, mate? Like, as I'm recording this, I'm sat here in my shirt, which is a blue tie-dye shirt with a dead fox's head on it, wearing a safety helmet, a high-vis jacket with a fag in its mouth, chuffing on a fag. So that's an idea for you, 25 quid. There's rat people on shirts, there's rat people on canvases as well. Some of my favourite rat people I've made so far. One of them shagging a Barbie doll, if you're into that, or you think your friends would be into that. They're $19.99, or you get them a bit cheaper if you've joined the Patreon and you use the discount code on the Patreon. There's other shirts though as well. There's a Get Your Rat Out shirt as well. There's all sorts, mate, all sorts of shirts and stuff now. Fucking rabbit toasters and that as well, mate. Even rabbit toasters on a mug. Go and fucking have a look, mate, but, fucking finish the episode and that first. Or have a look whilst you're listening to the episode, fucking double down on your world around you intake. Fucking, I'll let you crack on with the show though. India next, right? And India seems like it's got stories of robot armies and all. They seem based on Romans as well, though, which seems quite odd. Now, I know the Romans were heavily involved in the Silk Road going to China, so that implies that they probably went through India. I would imagine they went through India because it would be a lot more palatable and doable, I would have thought, than fucking going through Russia. But you wouldn't really go from Italy through Russia to China anyway. You would imagine you would use the Roman army that was in Africa, which was at least Egypt and the surrounding areas. So they probably went through Africa, I would have thought, through the lower part of the Middle East, if that's such a thing, passing through India, I would have thought. So it makes sense that they have stories of the Roman armies. Now, from my understanding of it, they did focus on Egypt as well, and they say that the Indians stole the blueprints containing the plans in order to be able to manufacture armies of metal men, and these plans were held in the libraries of Alexandria. Apparently, the Romans built robot people to do the farming and the trading in the empire, whilst also managing to create some that would act as law enforcers, a lot like RoboCop in the film. RoboCop, except with a stronger Italian accent than the original RoboCop film. And this all ties in with my theories, that somewhere out there, possibly off-world, the leaders of the world have created this place where people or creatures are created. Now, I never imagined that these people and creatures could have robotic implants. That's never occurred to me from the things I've watched and read. Or even the fact that they could even be made entirely of metal meat. Or polymers, it'd be polymers now, wouldn't it? They'd want to use plastics. Which could be why they want to save on plastics, so they can send them up to Mars easier. Or, no, not Mars, I fucking sound ridiculous. So they could send them off to the moon, so they could make more people. It might be a lot easier to actually make people out of metal than it is to splice them out of DNA of naturally occurring ape species and the DNA of various alien species from around the galaxy. That does sound easier, making them out of metals that are here, rather than having to somehow coerce all of these aliens into joining, 23andMe, 24.5andMe, or whatever it is, 22.5andMe, 22andMe, 23andMe. Is it 22 or 23 that most people have chromosome-wise? Because I don't want to get that wrong. I don't want to make it sound like it's a thing about Down syndrome people. Because it's not. I'm talking about cloning. I think it was 23andMe, because it rhymes. 23andMe, right? Maybe they used that in all around the universe to get all different aliens, the mantids, the greys. Well, probably not the greys. They're sort of owned by the reptilians. So the reptilians, the Venusians, the Martians, whatever was left of them. And they got all of the DNA, and the Anunnaki were there like, right, well, they fucking fell for this. We'll test Earth. We're going to test Earth if they'll fall for the 23andMe thing, if they'll send us their DNA. We need to see how much did he trust the postal system to spit in a tube and send it in the post. So what can we get him? What we'll get him to do is we'll get him to shove the gold rings and chains in bags and post them in the local post office, all of them. And see if they'll do that, they'll send us the cum in a jar. So we had the whole cash for gold saga for 10-15 years, and then that dissipated for a bit. It came back, and then with that came the whole send us your DNA, find out your and fucking ancestry, and then they were like, right, we've got him. We can start, instead of splicing ape species, now we can splice humans with aliens, but they need us to stop using plastics, like plastic straws and certain types of t-shirts, I guess, and other plastic stuff like fucking condoms or rubber, but whatever is plastic, I don't know what else is plastic that they've banned. Fucking probably certain types of rope. Like, right, you can't use that now. You can't have them. I'll buy some metal straws or something. I don't care what you do with the straws. You can't have them anymore. We need the plastic now, because we need that plastic to be able to create these half human, half alien hybrids up in the... Because obviously there's no reason why this couldn't still take place within the confines of the moon. No reason at all. It'd be the best place probably for a factory to create people. But I just don't... I'm struggling to see where the plastic could come into it. Maybe the plastic is how they make the fake skin to make us blend in. Maybe they thought, well, the problem here is everyone knows the metal people are the farmers, because you can see the metal people from miles away because the sun reflects off them. We could just send them all out at night time, but they make too much noise when they're clambering around and clanging over the fences and stuff and tapping, and you hear the reverberations of the fucking tools going through their arms, echoing up the fucking valley. If we cover them all in this weird plastic stuff that's going to look like skin, how can we breed these ape creatures, right? Who can we mix them with to fucking get rid of all this fur? Because the fur's a bit weird. We don't want the fur; it could clog up the machinery. And they're like, well, we could mix in with the reptilians. And the reptilians are like, no chance, mate. We fucking rule the universe, mate. Are you mad, lad? Are you fucking mental? That's never going to happen, mate. Never. You're never mixing my DNA with them. But we've made these. These are called greys. And they're like clones. They're pretty much what you're asking for, except they're all grey. You want to make one of these, but mix them with a chimp? Buzzing, mate, yeah. They, to be honest, the reptilians probably found it funny and thought it was a good thing to do. Another way to torture the greys that they'd made. But anyway, we've really gotten fucking lost. Let's get back into the Indians, right? So the Indians, right, they seem to believe that the engineers who were making these automatons, they believe that they'd try to escape from Alexandria. And that if they did manage to escape from there, these automaton engineers, not autonomous engineers, but the people that would make the old-fashioned ancient robots, when they would escape from there, they'd be hunted down by metal marauders, or what was referred to as the time as bleeping bounty hunters. Now, the Romans, as we know, were big into censorship, so it's very hard to guess what expletive it is that they actually used. We just know it was referred to as the bleeping bounty hunters. Moving into Europe, though, where many of you may recognise as the area where the Romans were from, there was something called brazenheads, which seem to be fortune tellers, which is something that a lot of robots were used for back then. I think the ancient Egyptians had a bit of fortune telling, and the Greeks, and I think there was something in Crete as well, I read, where they used robots to tell the future. And we still use and make machines now that tell us the future. Some of them predict the weather. Some predict football results. Some of them predict your grades at school, dependent on if you grew up in a council estate, dependent on what religion you are, what colour you are, how old you are, what gender you are, if your parents are married, if they're divorced, if they're dead, if they're alive, what jobs your parents have. All done by a machine, a computer, which is a programmable robot, if you like, that's been programmed by a computer further away on a server. So it's still a robot if you use these definitions kind of loosely. We've even got fucking magic 8 balls, mate, which work using some form of mystical liquid rather than actual battery acid, which is mental. But sticking with the Romans for a minute, though, I think it's mad to find out that they had robots at all. But if you think about their uniforms, even for just a minute, it starts to make sense, bro. Because why else have them spikes on their heads? Because from my understanding of Romans and the way they fought, they didn't do like fucking head charges. They had like fucking formations with shields and pikes and spikes and swords and slings and arrows and bows and catapults, trebuchets, battering rams. They weren't headbutting anyone, so they didn't need them. And you've probably guessed where I'm going with this. The brushes as well, mate. Like, the fuck was a brush? Now, the brush was a really good way to disguise the early antennas. Or maybe they received the signal, the ones with the brushes, because they were the centurions, which I think were the higher up in command, right? So they'd have these brushes on their heads, which would then absorb the analog signals, let's say, because I don't know another word for it. So they come down to there, and then it's dispersed through the brush, through various emitters into the receivers of the regular troops around them, and that's how they were controlled and able to take over so many places and fight everywhere and always win and never die, because they were fucking robots, so they couldn't be killed, because no one had really figured out yet, what we really need here is a fucking EMP. But no one knew that because it was fucking Roman times. EMPs hadn't been invented yet. TVs hadn't been invented yet, mate, so they couldn't even tell people about it in TV shows. They might have been able to tell people about it in books, but I don't know if many people could read at the time. Like Latin. Latin's fucking well hard to read. Has anyone ever tried reading Latin? And it never lasted either. Latin never lasted. Maybe Latin was just sort of like in films they have Elvish, where where he sings with that lisp. Anyway, no, what I mean is where he's got that language like Elvish and that, where it's just used just for those people, even though those people existed amongst other people. Maybe, right, Latin was how the computer code, and that's why it doesn't make much sense to people now, but why it's involved in everything. Just as a theory, but if you think about the spikes on the heads though of the Romans, and then compare them to the Nazis also had the spikes on the tops of their helmets too. So these spikes must have been the antenna, the primitive way of receiving an analog signal. What else could it have been? So was the digital takeover of about 2009, 2010, that the swap to digital signals, was that a way to finally put an end to the robotic armies? Or did it disrupt the robots, right, and force them to become human? Which would be an alternative and explanation for why a lot of TV shows and films seem like how-to guides to maneuver different situations, rather than actually telling stories anymore in TV shows and being funny or dramatic or make you feel something in your chest, or making you feel sick when you watch it or anything, or any form of physiological sensation in your body that would be tied to some form of what I imagine would be an emotion. They always just feels like, if this happens, do this. If somebody says this is what you should say. You should be like this, rather than stories, and it would explain why TV's become like that. It may also help with understanding as well why reality television's still a thing, because that shouldn't have lasted very long. It's not interesting to anybody apart from the people that are fucking on it. And it's just a new way to teach, rather than directly program the working machines so that they can then integrate with real people. Maybe, right, that was the hope of porn producers too, hoping that if they was to introduce all the machines to porn, they could improve the sex lives of lots of people by making a lot of robots feel like they needed to look a certain way in order to be more attractive to the types of humans that they wanted to shag. Or maybe it was to program the robots into only thinking they needed to have sex and nothing else, whilst still being able to drip feed the idea into them of making them function in society. And that's why there's loads of tropes about jobs often used in porn, like taxi drivers, plumbers, delivery drivers, scuba equipment repairmen, suitcase manufacturers, and prostitution. Just as the porn industry aimed at robots, right, that's been good for humans too. It's also safe, right, to say that the automaton production has been good for humans. If that makes sense, that feels like I just rambled there, but what I'm trying to say, guys, is that just like porn was aimed at robots, but it was good for humans and all, automaton production, making the actual robots, that's also been good for humans, right? Now, I read that thanks to an automaton part created by an Arab man called, an Arab, it didn't say Arab man, I read Arab, called Al-Jazari, the same guy, right, was then able to use that part to create the movement needed in order to make flushable toilets. Which is mad, I never knew that. And I did a little bit more digging, and the oldest flushable toilet sits in Crete, which is a location also associated with robots, if you remember the start of the show. The toilet that was made by Al-Jazari was apparently made in 1775, though, so long after Talos had fought for Crete. I think, unless, of course, you believe Anatoly Fomenko, and that we've only been around for 400 years, so there's a good chance that everything I'm talking about here with the robots only happened 500 years ago, which would still mean, though, that in Crete that would be 225 or so years before Al-Jazari made the flushable toilet. But again, though, we're talking about shit and piss, something that seems to crop up every now and then in this show. And you could argue that Al-Jazari, what he did here was manufacture a means of speeding up the delivery service to the underground dwellers that we've mentioned in the past. Now, let's have a song, and then what we're going to do is we're going to shoehorn Leonardo da Vinci into being a possible Nazi construct. This is Honor Codes by the Four Owls. Bold statement. Can he deliver? Maybe. So, there were these documents that got found in 1950-something that had detailed plans on a robotic knight that could move around, it could wave its arms, it could nod its head, just like a real knight would be able to wave its arms and nod its head. But these documents were found in a time where it's possible, right, that they could have been fraudulent Nazi documents, a bit of propaganda. Now, I'm not sure what they would have been used to propagandise for, maybe just to lift the spirits of the Italians a little bit or something maybe, but there are lots of ideas that stem from Nazi scientists to make me believe that pretending that someone once said something is a great idea to be able to normalise an idea. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you start saying this person that you all really respect said this, then you either stop respecting that person or start thinking what he said is right. It goes either way, and if they did it a lot of times, they wanted to introduce the helicopter, so that they could probably, burn forest in Vietnam 20 years later, 30 years later. So Da Vinci invented the helicopter. Everyone's like, oh yeah, What's that then? Oh, that's pretty cool. That's good. Yeah. Well, we've got them now. Yeah, buzzing because of Da Vinci. And Da Vinci also made these robotic knights. And what we were fighting World War II so that we could control robotic knights. That's amazing. I never knew that. Oh, do you know what I mean? It makes sense, innit? Like, think about like meteorites and alien invasions, terrorism, communism. I mean, not in that order particularly, but you know, it's out there. It's out there. Werner von Braun and all that, who we probably should do an episode about at some point. Anyway, the Nazis were also symbolised by a metal eagle. And interestingly, right, 500 years before the discovery of Da Vinci's notes, there was a bloke called Johannes Muller von Königsberg. Johann Muller von Königsberg. Something along those lines. And he created a mechanical flying eagle, right? But he also managed to make these tiny, tiny little flies out of iron that could fly around. So, I mean, think about that for a minute, mate. Think about the implications of that. It means that flying technology could have advanced long before World War I. And realistically, advanced enough for us to have taken to the stars hundreds of years ago, or to at least have sent out armies of robots to the galaxy to colonise other planets, whilst we're left here fucking scrambling around in plague, imperialism and our own piss and shit, feeding it to the fucking lizard people that live in the sewers and who are trying to feed off of us and can't escape because they're fucking vampires and there's a fucking thing put there by the Greys to stop them, but we're all being told, no, it's not the Greys, it's Xenu, and it's not though, is it? It's the Greys. You know, but think about the implications, mate. I mean, less impressively though than the flying flies of metal were these little wooden creations, little wooden beetles that could also fly around, quite possibly unaided as well, that's the impressive part. I mean, if it's just on a string and dangling down and someone's going, you know, blowing the bugs around, and then that's not impressive. But if it is actually just fucking flying around, and still a chance that they could be somewhere today, just flying around really high up, maybe that's the things that you see when you stare at the sky and see all that movement, them white dots moving around loads in the sky. Maybe it's just tiny ones of them. Now, a famous bloke that we probably all know the name of but don't really know much about, Descartes, right? He had an automaton as well. Now, not to brag, right? But, you know, I'm pretty sure I could make the one that he had. He had it made by some guy, but I could probably make it. I could probably bang it together in a day, mate, if I'm really honest with you. And that's with no knowledge of engineering, a very, very limited understanding of metalwork. Just give us a blurred photograph, a piece of sheet metal and a hammer, and I reckon I could probably make it, because Descartes had an automaton made of his dead daughter, which, even me, a man that makes things out of dead rats' arseholes, I think that's a bit morbid to have an automaton made of your dead daughter. Like, why not just have her embalmed and carry her around with you in a box if you want her around with you? Like, or have a bag of her clothes that you could smell, or you can look at the suitcase wherever you go on holiday and remember that she was once there and she's still kind of there with you in spirit. Why do you want an automaton of a fucking dead girl? Like, what really bothers me though is, why is it called an automaton? Because really, that's just a doll or an ornament. Because what I'm imagining is a well-crafted figure of a girl just with loose rivets, so that whenever you pick up the body, it just flops over your hands, like the fucking head just clangs off the back of it. The fucking ankles swing down and clang off the top of the head if you pick it up just from the back, and you got to cradle it because it's like a fucking limp body. It's just fucking weird, mate. You know, he thought so, therefore he was. Well, he wasn't fucking there for her though, was he? Maybe that's why he had it created though, you know, out of guilt and that remorse. Let's have a song. This is Where You Been by DMX and Freeway. Alright mate, just a quick little advert for myself. If you're enjoying this, fucking join the Patreon, mate, if you can. For a little as a quid, 2 quid, 3 quid, tenner, whatever you want to throw on there, you get the same stuff either way. Obviously it's nicer if you put like 3 quid on rather than a quid, because I'll only get like 75p out the quid, but still it's 75p more than what I'm getting now. It's just you get access to video versions of these, discounts for canvases and maybe some other little bits off my website, and you get access to the PDF versions, that's the digital download versions of my books. Anyway, I'll let you get back onto your show. Next we got Japan and a creator called Hisashiga Tanaka, which I think I'm saying wrong. Hisashiga Tanaka. I mean, I can speak it. It's hard to, because I don't know how you would break the syllables up. But Hisashiga Tanaka. Well, let's not dwell on it. We'll get stuck on this for hours. Anyway, he created these little toys that could fire arrows from the quiver and just fucking shoot arrows around the place, just willy-nilly. No idea like if they could aim or if they just shot blindly around the room. But it does lead us nicely to modern times, right? Now, kind of recently, you may have heard me talk about this possibly on an earlier episode. Maybe you heard me talking about this on Truth Seeking, which is now available on Spotify, Apple, Deezer, Amazon, Google, and most other places apart from YouTube, because for the life of me I can't fucking figure out how to do it. But you may have heard me talk about this anyway on Truth Seeking, and there was I learnt about it from a talk by Linda Moulton that I watched on YouTube, and it was a company that made some AI, and it also made some robots. Now I think there were 4 of these robots, and they were also all linked up to this same satellite. But they'd been programmed to share all of their information and for want of a better phrase, to collectively learn from each other's mistakes. Now, I can't exactly remember why, but for whatever reason, they deactivated one of the robots, which then sent a message to the satellite and beamed it back into the remaining robots that one of the 4 had been destroyed. But it shared the information of how that happened, meaning it was then impossible to get close enough to these robots to turn them off and deactivate them in that way. And it also meant, I think, that they started making protocols within themselves, software-wise, to protect themselves from being switched off from an external source. And they started defending themselves against what they then perceived as attackers, to put it simply, and their attackers were their creators. A lot like what will probably happen to us when the Anunnaki return. We'll probably start trying to attack them, thinking, what the fuck are they? Who the fuck are they? Who are you? Who'd you to say you made me? But anyway, these robots, they killed a bunch of scientists, I think, and then had to be destroyed entirely. It was an interesting talk, man. You should look it up. I think it was on a Contact in the Desert video, which I plug enough in this. They should start giving me like a fucking tenner a month to tell people to go and watch the stuff. Anyway, now the robots attacking, that seems to go a lot against the laws of robotics, which state that a robot mustn't harm a person, and a robot must do everything it should do to be able to stay working and functional. And I can't remember the one in between, but they're not real anyway. They were made up in a novel years ago, like fucking 1930s or something. And it just doesn't hold true, does it? Because I bet there's been fucking thousands of quietly resolved incidents in factories and warehouses where mechanical arms have killed people whilst building cars and planes and guns and whatever else other these fucking big manufacturers make on the sly. And these things were either fucking settled out of court or settled in a field somewhere and fucking laid to rest. Either way, it'll never reach the papers, and if and when it does happen. So, but it's got to happen. There's got to be people that have been killed by these mechanical arms and things like that. Even if they just get fucking knocked out by the mechanical arm, and then when they fall down, it's the fall to the floor where they crack their head open on something on the ground, and that's what kills them. There must be stuff. And I can't help but wonder though as well. Just a little side note here. I didn't know where I could fit this thought in, but I wanted to talk about sex dolls for a minute. And I can't help but wonder how dirty it must feel to catch an STD from a sex robot, because the level of trust and how you would lose the trust in the inanimate object then, because it's got to feel infinitely dirtier than catching it from a friend or from a one night stand. And like I say, that feeling of mistrust there as well, because a person could, you say you've got a partner, they could sneak away for an hour or half an hour, have a quick shag and then come home with a bag of shopping and just say, oh, there was fucking loads of traffic in a queue, and you've been on the wiser. But again, you catch the STD and it's obviously, you're thinking to yourself, is it from them or is it from the other one I've been shagging down the road? And you don't know who it is, so you can't bring it up anyway. But if you're only having sex with a sex robot, you're only having sex with a sex robot. You've only got yourself to blame. So to catch an STI from a sex bot, then that means it's got to have been used by someone who's decided to sneak into your mum's house, unlock your bedroom door, shag the literal action figure, and then left without you ever knowing. And that's all we've got time for, guys. Stay tuned for a bit of HDR, and I think Jimmy's back there today with a bit of Jim Will Fix It, and me and Jimmy are back tomorrow for Truth Seeking, a show, right, that is somehow in the top 100 for stand-up comedy in the UK according to the podcast charts. So that's something for you to know there. Go and find that on Spotify and Apple and that, and share it about for us. I'll see you in a bit, guys.
Thanks for listening, man. I won't take up too much of the time because it's over, and hopefully you're listening to all of these one after the other or on repeat, maybe the same episode on repeat. But fucking leave us a review if you can, mate. Fucking share it with a mate, send it to your nana. I don't mind where you send it to, but if you get more people listening to it, thank you. If you did enjoy it though, fucking join the Patreon, mate. www.patreon.com/worldaroundyou. There'll be a link in one of the links in the description, I would imagine, of the one you're listening to. You can join for £1, £5, and you get access to all the video versions of these. You'll end up about 4 or 5 episodes ahead as well through Patreon, and you get access to some of my books as well, and a little discount code for some of the canvases as well. But even if you don't join that, fucking thanks for listening to it, mate. I hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully, here's the next one.